Welcome everyone back to another Team Kitchen Fable video. I'm here with Zach, and we're going to talk a little bit about the bans, but more importantly, what the bans mean for the meta. Zach, do you have anything you want to share before we get started?
Yeah, for sure. I think kind of overall, there's definitely a bit of a stigma out there, very polarizing opinions, and that's totally fair. I mean, it's a card game, and it's going to affect everyone differently when a ban or errata or any kind of announcement of this level comes out. But I think it was kind of interesting taking a look back of just each ban and what it's meant for Flesh and Blood as a whole. LSS had a really difficult task of analyzing a game that initially in Welcome to Wraith was very back and forth. Kind of you do your thing, I react to your thing and try to do my own thing. The whole long game pitch stack setup. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. And I think that discussion kind of starts off originally with Drone of Brutality and kind of what is free and what is too free in Flesh and Blood. Cheerios Briar has been a thing for a while, at least kind of.
And it always will be, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Just like a Magic term, Cheerios being, zero cost whatever. In Magic, it's zero cost artifacts are kind of termed Cheerios because you just play them all. But, it's an interesting balance because when you're playing things that are free and it's benefiting you, something like Card Draw for Plunder Run, LSS has to really navigate what the boundaries are for this game. Because when you're developing a game for this long, it's still a younger game. They still have a lot of wiggle room and things they can grow into. Sometimes it's difficult to, in the moment, make that decision and then see it a couple years down the road how that's going to affect things. They're developing later sets as we speak now beyond Everfest. So maybe kind of looking at some of those things is also what really went into a ban like this. But yeah, I think overall I agree with the ban. I think it was a good idea. I think LSS isn't just making these decisions because the community was up in arms about it. I think that's obviously a factor because those kind of things will get the content creators, the developers, and everyone else looking at that. But they could have been looking at it beforehand. We don't know what the turning point was for them, but I would have to guess, LSS is a great company and they're not going to just take community feedback wholeheartedly 100% and run with it. They're going to back it with data. They're going to back it with what do I see Flesh and Blood in 5 years and what are those boundaries going to look like? So I think, that's kind of my opening thoughts for it.
Yeah, I think you and I have very similar opinions about it. We haven't talked about it before recording this video, but for me, I think it all goes back to Drone. I think in general, LSS has been handling their bans properly, and I think each of their bans has one core theme, and that's keeping the current and future design space for Flesh and Blood healthy, right? So when you're like, what's free and what's too free, right? What Drone of Brutality did was it enabled decks to have no consequence for swinging a 6 attack every turn or blocking with it. There was no consequence for that, and it made it basically impossible to get decked or to have to make an efficient list that can ensure you could kill your opponent before time or before you ran out of offensive resources. So I think that's the basis, right? And then there's a little bit of iffy stuff with the Duskblade thing, but at least they recognized from the get-go. Sure, they maybe could have spent more time in playtesting, right? They said that themselves. But they recognized from the get-go, and they said, we are not going to allow this. And this is why their bans are really good, because of their timing, right? They didn't allow Duskblade to influence the calling season or the Road to National season, Road to Nationals was over before Aria came out, but they didn't allow it to influence that at all. They said, we're not going to risk it. We know that this isn't quite up to snuff. We're not going to allow it to be a part of this meta, right? And then we can assume that if at the beginning of December, when they made the empty ban announcement, that they probably would have made these exact same bans at the time had the New Zealand's national season not been delayed, right?
Right. Yep.
So given the difficult situation they had, LSS was able to say, hey, we want everybody who played in a nationals this season to have played on the same playing field. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to have to stay quiet on our ban announcements, right?
Right.
We're going to have to kick the can a little bit. And also, they had to do so knowing that Everfest was coming out at the beginning of February, so they couldn't kick the can too far, right? And I think if they continue to do this by maintaining the integrity of what I personally like, or what even LSS is calling is the seasons of Flesh and Blood. You have skirmish season. We're going into ProQuest season now. We had RTN season back in August. If they can continue to maintain the seasons of Flesh and Blood while keeping the long-term living card game design space of Flesh and Blood healthy, I think we're in great hands. And I personally think that Plunder Run and Ball Lightning were the right targets. They provided too much value for their card cost and influenced the play of the game enough to where it erased heroes from the meta that I think, and this goes into our main topic of discussion here, guys. The main topic of discussion is going to be what heroes we think will return to the meta and what heroes we think will not be as prevalent in the meta because of these bans.
For sure. Yeah, and I think you touched on some interesting points there, kind of exploring on my initial take with boundaries. Weapons is something that, the power level is quite high for weapons already. If you just look at like the consistency of things like Anathos and Winter's Wail, Dawnblade, they've been expanding that boundary for quite a while as well. And it's not that, they're really trying to kick it down and bring the power level down at all. It's very touch and go and niche, especially as you start adding layers with, the different talent system and how classes are going to get access to different talents over time. If we see hero reprints with different talents, we see a ranger with a different talent, or we start seeing like reprints of old heroes like Viserai with a different talent, something like that. So I think a lot of people are jumping the gun a little hard for at least lack of information. A lot of this I think was backed by data, both from tournament reports, both from internal testing, maybe some external testing. But I think people need to give a little bit more faith in the process here, especially with the, if you walk it back and you link it to all the previous bans, they've had that similar theme of pushing the boundary of mechanically, this is not what we want our game to become, where there's infinite combos or infinite pitch stacking. They don't want anything to get, and not that it ever got that out of hand, but that's not the direction they want it to go.
And I think they probably could have leaned into that a little bit more with this announcement, because they kept referring back to Briar. But if you read it, you can tell they're talking about the long-term implications of these cards, right? Like with Ball Lightning, if we get more Lightning and Elemental Lightning support, and we get a new hero, maybe that carries over, and they have to worry about this card that is overtuned with those future cards and heroes, right? So when they ban, it's not about, oh, we think this is too broken or etc. It's, we don't think this is healthy for the long term of like design space of the game. And it actually kind of frees them up to say, okay, now we don't have to worry. It makes future sets a little bit more clean in the fact that the sets no longer have to fix what happened before, right? Sure. They can say, here's our sandbox. This is Flesh and Blood. And sometimes we'll build a sand castle outside of that box and we won't know it. And then eventually we have to go knock it down and say, no. This was the sandbox that we intended to be on. And we're only going to work within this space. And I think that's really good.
Yeah, even like, not to go on a full tangent here, but like, I love playing board games. I love playing living card games. And like one of the biggest detriments for a living card game, or really any card game with an eternal format, no rotating list of sets and whatnot. It's just a ban list, errata list, restricted lists, is that when that card pool gets too big, like there has to be almost a reset button, or kind of like, I mean, you can look at games like Yu-Gi-Oh! That just have a wildly changing ban list where it's just completely different one year to the next. But um, you know, making things refined now and building that foundation and like testing the boundaries, but going back to where home base is and slowly expanding that is going to be so much more healthy for the game in the long run.
And I think a comment on Plunder Run, right, is at the and this was a comment that I made to one of our friends, which was, I'm a little bit mad about Ball Lightning. I'm a little bit mad about Duskblade because they are in the most recent set. What I am not mad about is Drone of Brutality and Plunder Run, because the game at the time needed those cards to exist, right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
in Welcome to Wraith, you always had those those grindy reactionary games. You were going down to the wire. You were playing your whole deck. You were getting the cycles through, right? And Drone of Brutality kind of made it easier on players to not have games that just ended with draw, right? And I think that is what the purpose of the card was. And if I had to get into LSS's shoes really, really intentionally, I think they probably knew this when Welcome to Wraith was out. And
I think additionally, the specifically the focus on Blitz kind of ties in with that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the going into Blitz made it more clear, but I think they kind of had that on their watch list from the start, but it was required to allow Welcome to Wraith to thrive.
For sure.
And I think with Plunder Run, I don't think it was a similar thing. I don't know if it was always on a watch list, but you needed Plunder Run to exist in Arcane Rising because you had heroes like Kano who needed the benefit, who at the time, before Crew, you couldn't just run Kano and OTK, so you couldn't just combo off on stuff. You didn't have access to those crucial things like Snapback, like Chain Lightning to extend those plays. You weren't going to get off 40 arcane damage in a turn.
For sure.
Same is true of Viserai. Viserai he had Rune Flash, he had Spellblade Assault, etc., but he didn't have Maverin Skies. He didn't have the ability to say, I'm going to go wide. He didn't have Sonata. He didn't have Bloodsheath, right? So he needed his turns to be more impactful. He needed that action to activate his ability when he played a Runeblade card, and to essentially allow him to block 2, play 2, maybe swing into Nebula Blade and draw a card on hit so he can get an arsenal to set up for the next turn. And that was what the game needed at the time. So I think Plunder Run existing was always a very good thing. And you can see how Plunder Run affected Welcome to Wraith Heroes. Mostly just Katsu, really only Katsu in a positive way. But it played directly into Ninja, which is card draw, discard, tutor, continue combo, right? Punish your opponent for not blocking the way that they should be, right?
For sure.
I think that's the last thing I have to say about the ban itself, though. Do you have anything you want to add before we move on?
Not too much. I think, honestly, just the last point there is kind of expanding on what you're saying already, is analyzing how that gets used with other heroes, right? Because if you have such a resource-intensive hero that doesn't have the go again, that doesn't have, like you said, Maverin Skies is the natural go again for Viserai. Even Bloodsheath Skeleton is what turned on OTK and still gets used in mid-range. Without those, when you're limited to 4 cards, what are you going to do when you don't have your Rune Flash go again or anything else? I mean, it's like, you can't really do much. So I think just identifying how free it was as a generic was important, because it wasn't just tied to Viscerai specifically. It wasn't just tied to Kano specifically. It's generic. So as we go forward, that needs to get reanalyzed.
Exactly. I think you put it as best as anyone could have. So I think now, guys, we're going to go ahead and talk about what Team Kitchen Fable thinks of this ban. So I asked the Team Kitchen Fable players to let me know which heroes they think are going to benefit from this meta shift and which heroes they think are probably going to be hurt a little bit from this meta shift. And I think we're going to start by talking, and it's so funny. I was recording a video on one of these heroes that we're going to be talking a lot about tonight. We're going to be talking about heroes that will be coming back into the meta. And I think the first one of note, as I pull up this list from our team, is you see a few Dorinthias on there. And I was in the middle of... I literally had just recorded a video about saying Dorinthia will never come back into the meta. And I somewhat believe this still. I do believe that Dorinthia, as a hero with her design, unless they do something to drastically buff the warrior class, which I think would break the class, I think we'll see warriors prevalent in the future, whatever the third one is, maybe more Bolton, but I don't think we see Dorinthia as a long-term hero. And my thesis is just that she relies on her opponent not knowing enough about the game, and it's less about her sequencing is important, but it is more about her opponent not being able to manage her card pool. So if her opponent has a good understanding of what she's capable of, they can navigate around it. But anyways, here's the list from Team Kitchen Fable. I didn't organize it that well. I didn't give names of the players who put it down. But on first glance, I think people think Kano's going to stick around. I think that's probably not true. I don't think so. I think the deletion of Briar, Cheerios Briar.
I mean, in relation, yes, but we definitely got to see what comes out of Everfest for sure. I think the announcement of Icelander, Islander, however you want to say it. I mean, we've already got confirmed, potential generic wizard cards coming back in. I think that might be more of what they're saying rather than just the ban errata announcement for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're seeing a lot of Prism here. I don't think that's a surprise. It took me a little bit. I was so excited because I'm like, oh my god, guys, Dash is gonna come back. Dash isn't gonna get shredded by Briar every game. It's not gonna be channel mount plunder run into like a bunch of nonsense that Dash can't block out. And then I sat for a little bit and I'm like, oh no, this means Prism is back. And I have a very good win rate against Prism, but you will never see me choose to practice against Prism. I just don't enjoy that. Any hero into Prism is just not fun for me. It's just like oppressive flesh and blood. I feel like the entire hero is just designed to make me hate my life. So I won't play it unless I sit across somebody at a tournament. So I do think Prism's going to be back. I do think she will be, especially with Everfest support, I think she'll be stronger than ever. And I'm not
Prism
looking forward
inherently
to it.
is definitely one of, if not the most flexible, like out the gate heroes LSS has designed in terms of card pool and hero design. I personally enjoy the matchup. I've been playing a lot of Old Man recently, and I mean, I think Oldham going into Prism is, at least now where we have things tuned, it's really interesting because it kind of feels like the older days of how Bravo and Prism felt, where it was like very coin flippy of one person's going to take the lead and there might be one or two chances for them to flip sides, but it's like always a tight game. But yeah, I mean, it's still a grind regardless. I mean, I'm playing Oldham, so of course everything's a grind, but yeah, Prism gets set up with the Moras or even just starts slapping you with the Heralds. It's there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, I did phrase this question as list 3 heroes that are likely to come back into the meta, but I think heroes in the meta that are going to benefit greatly, Oldham for sure. His efficient defense, offense, long-term, full game oppressive nature got that much better now that he doesn't have to worry about Plunder Run throughout the whole game, or Plunder Run into Lightning Press, pushing through damage. There's going to be a lot. There's going to be just fewer surprises. Then again, we are going to see Everfest support, but I'm saying just the way I see it now. If Plunder Run were to have been banned in November, the last 2 months would have been just Oldhim, super oppressive all the way through. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Oldhim before we keep going.
I think he definitely benefits from it, and I think it's funny timing too, because at least from what I've seen recently, I mean, I don't watch enough games to be like, I know what's going on in the meta right now, because realistically we just don't have enough bigger tournaments going on. But from what I've seen, and some Oldhim players have really been trying out like more aggro approach, which has been interesting. And Briar kind of taking a step back on at least what level of aggression she can output really opens the door for people to explore that, and whatever comes out with the Everfest support might support that some more as well. Because I mean, initially you just had to block everything. That was Oldhim was the tank to get over Briar, and that was like his shining moment in the meta, really.
Yeah, I think it's only listed once on this list, but I think it's worth pointing out, and that's Boltyn. I think Boltyn is going to be an absolute animal now, because when you think about what was holding Boltyn back, it was his inefficiency in against aggro matchups in the late game, right? If you're at 5 health and Boltyn's at 5 health, and you're a Runeblade or Ninja or anything, your attacks are going to be so efficient. And I'm just talking specifically playing into the Raiden build, but even if a Saber's combo goes off and you're getting into the late game, you're fine, right? Boltyn's going to attack once if you can take 2 cards out of his hand, and that's about it. But now, since most now that Seeds is gone, right? Because Chain was Boltyn's big race problem before.
Right.
I didn't really consider Aggro Katsu to be an issue for Boltyn if you were playing it right. And then it was Briar, right? Yep. Now there's no one really as consistently oppressive as Boltyn, in my opinion. As Raiden Boltyn, playing a Take Flight into a Battlefield Blitz into a Raiden, and just like non-stops, using that one tunic resource to do like 20 damage. You're not going to see any other heroes be that efficient. So me personally, I'm expecting us to see more Raiden Boltyns, and then kind of that shift into the Sabers matchup when you need to be able to OTK, right? When I think we'll see. I actually don't have. We'll have to ask Jimmy about this. I think Jimmy probably plays Sabers into Oldhim, but I may be totally off there.
I was kind of curious asking you, since you worked with Jimmy on it more than I have, if his builds have ever relied on Plunder Run. Because I know Boltyn in general is very resource.
It's in there, card. But it's not the most important card by a long mile. Like I saw people.
Well, I guess I was just curious if it was in there, and like how much of the deck it was taking.
It's not that important, and I think he may even have taken it out in the last few months, because sometimes you just had to play out your whole hand of 4. And Plunder Run was just a dead card. It's a dead card when you flip it off Lumina. It's a dead card to charge for via the Vanguard. And sometimes we just found it was more effective to do something like Take Flight, Battlefield Blitz, Raiden into Bolt of Courage for that draw, right? You could sequence to force your card draws versus, a lot of the times if you're playing a 4, sometimes even a 5-card hand, depending on what it is, you're only attacking twice with an attack action, maybe only once. Especially if you get stuck with like and I hate to say you get stuck with Lumina Ascension, but you could get stuck with Lumina. And Plunder Run with Lumina is just like you're kind of negating the efficiency of that turn. You're creating like a glass ceiling of what that turn could have been. And I think that I don't think Plunder Run affects Boltyn at all.
Fair enough. It's funny you mention it like that too, because I wonder if like design wise that's kind of how they were thinking the intention of powerful generics like this. It's like supplementing heroes that aren't as fully enveloped within their talent and kind of card pool for functionality. And then, we got someone like Briar who's interacts very well with generics overall. Just a interesting point, I thought.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about on this list? I think maybe
It's funny to see Viserai on the list, considering
he's already OP. He's literally tier 0.
It's funny that how long it took people to get on Viserai, because I've played Viserai so much since I played this game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't play against you because I didn't want to have to play against your Viserai, because I would literally just get dunked on. Like, in in Mario 64 when like Mario picks up Bowser by his ankles and fucking or by his tail and like flings him into a thing. Like, that's how I felt every time I played against you. I was just getting like thrown around in circles, and then I would hit like some bomb and blow up. Like, it was the worst.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when like Blitz Viserai was a thing and still like being developed. That was hilarious.
That was interactive. I loved that part.
Hey, he's got Sigil of Suffering now. He can interact with you.
Yeah, I can give you 2 cards for the price of 1.
Right. I do think it's interesting seeing Reinar and Levia, however you want to say that, on here as well. I have heard a lot of people wanting to like dive back into Reinar for some reason, and I know it's viable. I just like
it's because Yazi quit Reinar, and there's a gap in the there's like literally like an empty space in the world of Flesh and Blood now that Yazi doesn't play Reinar.
It's so funny to me looking at like the design space of Flesh and Blood, and like I look at every hero and different kind of builds they can have and like optimizations they go for, and then I look at Brute and it's like a troll class for for casuals, and it's not. I mean, like it has very high aggro output. I will give it that 100%, but it's just so wild to me to see like a class go aggro and just throw it into the wind of dice,
which is why Levia is terrifying. Which is why Levia long term is like Everfest, if they give her like 1 card, she'll like be set over the edge. Like that's my opinion. Like, playing against Levia is like always super oppressive, and you always almost lose but don't. Right. And and if she gets to that point,
we talked about it in Vegas Classic Constructed. I was on Dash, and it was 3rd or 4th round. I played a Reinar, and he arg smashed 2 induction chambers and a fresh Teklo core, and I still won that game, but like it went to time and I was sweating the whole time. Like that whole game was crazy. But it's such a coin flip, like he rolled a 6 on that, but then I think the only reason I won was because 2 other times he used scab skins, he rolled 1s. And like that gave me enough time to come back and like get I don't even remember that. It was crazy.
All right. I think that's enough of this list. I think we've actually mentioned every hero on here at this point. So let's go ahead and talk about the heroes that are likely not to come back, or likely to move slightly out of the metagame. And this is assuming, again, guys, no information. We're not speculating on the Everfest set right now. We're only talking about the current state of Flesh and Blood. But take with that what you will. We did mention that I think Levia could be set over the edge. I do think that some Kano support could really make him a little bit more consistent in control metas, because I think, when Kano can just like take down someone who runs a red line deck, right? That's fundamentally different from an Oldhim or a Bravo playing efficiently, or a Dorinthia coming in with a large set of blues, a very oppressive Dawnblade that Kano cannot afford to block efficiently. When you see stuff like that, what is he going to do? And anyways, so here are the heroes that we think are going to move out of the metagame. I don't think it's very surprising. I see 4 heroes here. Not surprising at all. And we have our obvious.
Actually, at the mention of Lexi, because she definitely did not rely on ball lightning the way that Briar did.
It's
She
nah. I
used
mean,
it, like it's good.
it's Sag. No. It's pretty Sag. The the Death Dealer Lightning Lexi build is like significantly not as good.
That's not what I think about. When
I
I'm
know
thinking about
that's what most people don't think, but that's what I run when I play Lexi. And my new Horizon came in the mail yesterday, and I'm so sad.
Just in time.
Yeah, just in time for me to have to unsleeve everything and go to ice. I have the Kamigawa sleeves, dude. Like, it's a little bit sad.
Already?
I got them all set up. I don't have. It's not like near me. I would show everybody otherwise, but I'd been planning this deck for months, and I just like never wanted to spend the money on New Horizon, and then I finally did. Anyways, likely suspects. Briar Chain. I don't think we need to explain that really, personally. The Plunder run loss. I think Ball Lightning is pretty important for Briar, but in general, Chain really did rely on Plunder run to have spiky turns. Now he's basically got Art of War and Soul Reaping to really accelerate him into some crazy turns. I do think that will be mitigated in Everfest. I do think we're going to see something that makes Chain more efficient, and I think it'll maybe even apply to Briar as well. I am expecting LSS to maybe lean a little bit harder into Earthbriar. I don't think it was supported. I don't think it was quite good enough. I don't think, like, Blossoming Spellblade is a worthless card. Force of Nature is like, sure, I can fuse it, but can I really follow it up with anything?
Yeah.
Not really. It's very forced.
It felt very much like people trying to do Sting of Sorcery and Viscerai, and like you can't go wide enough to make it give you the same value back.
I mean, you could. I mean, if you just got lucky, though, like the way I would play it is Bloodsheath, Sonata. I would have the Sting in hand, or become the Arknight. I would get all my attacks. Then I would play. Then you got to play the Dread Triptych first because that's toxic as hell. Just the Sonata the Bloodsheath and the Dread Triptych.
You didn't play Mordred Tide yet.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I have had turns like that where you do the Mordred Tide into the Sonata combo, and your opponent might as well just walk away from the table.
That's the combo, right? It's literally like
you don't need it though.
We're gonna have like it's great. You want Mordred Tide, and you want like 1 to 2 Maubern Skies.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess Sting of Sorcery at that point does the same exact thing.
Well, no, because Sting of Sorcery is 1, and Mordred Tide on Dread Triptych turns it from 3 rune chance into 6.
Well, I'm thinking about after that. You didn't let me finish, okay? And then you use the creepers on the Dread Triptych reaction step, and then you play the Sting of Sorcery, and then you just play like a bunch of meet and greets and rune flashes. But anyways, so yeah, I do think that Ball Lightning is going to hurt Lightning Lexi. It is going to make playing in the current state a Lexi that isn't ice a little bit less effective. I also think that Ice Lexi is going to get completely dunked on by the control meta that's upcoming, right? Because we don't have crazy aggro for her to slow down. And so if we start to see Prism, Dash, even Bravo come back a little bit more in full force, she's not going to be able to get over their defenses and disrupt them as effectively. And personally, I'm going to have a field day as Dash into Ice Lexi. I'm going to love that. I'm looking forward to it. So I think that's the main reason, is not even the Lightning Lexi. I think the reason people put it is because the way they're expecting the meta to change is it's going to make Ice Lexi less relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that was a tough match too. That was I played at least in the Ohio area that I know, the best Ranger player I know in Ohio was like my 6th or 7th round matchup, and it came down to the wire. Me on Dash, we were both at 1 for like 4 or 5 turns, and I just barely inched that out. It was crazy.
Yeah, you induction chambered him to death. It's all right. Yeah. You can tell us, dude.
I mean, I did, but it was very down to the wire.
Yeah.
I actually I was tempted multiple times because I ended up for whatever reason with a Teklo core in Arsenal. But I remember like specifically having a turn where I thought about playing it and it would have meant like one less damage. But that met a block threshold that because I didn't do it won me the game.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. Here I am like messing up our stream. I totally like I don't know what happened there. Yeah. Um anyways, guys, Zach, unless you have anything to add, I think that pretty much actually we didn't mention Katsu. So before we wrap up, I don't think Katsu's that effective. I think mid-range Katsu is still the way to go, okay? I think if you're new to the game or if you're trying to try something spicy that's still good, I would say try mid-range Katsu. I don't think people have been giving it enough of a chance. It may be slightly worse now that Briar and Chain aren't going to be as effective. Because the main thing was the flick flack bonus and then also playing towards your Zen states, which would just block every individual arcane forever. Not forever, 2 turns, but it's still really good.
I have a different opinion on that, at least on one side of thing. I've always agreed with you that I think Katsu is the best hero if you're new to Flesh and Blood. Not just new to Flesh and Blood, but like you're new to the competitive scene and you want to learn branching decision making, you want to learn pitch stacking, you want to learn efficiency in your pitching and attacks and defense. Like that is the hero that is the golden rule for all of that. You have to learn all of those very well to play that hero well. I personally think though I could see him moving out because of like how much better mid-range players Prism and Oldemar. It's just it's not free, but it is more free than Katsu blocking, where you get to Crown of Seeds and Rampart. It's more free with Prism getting to create the auras and the spectral shields, and Kadachi was good for a really long time, and it's still good in Blitz, but I think there's too many ways around it now. I think people have, as a community, we have grown up and learned more about those topics I just covered. And just overall efficiency is going to phase some older heroes like that out, I think. And they could get more support from Everfest. I could be wrong on that. But again, just kind of looking at it as if we were to have a tournament next week, no Everfest or anything. If I saw like, and it's interesting too because we're still gonna see all these heroes, right? Like there's people who pick mains. There's people who are diehard class, fans of a certain class, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But I think as a success percentage of getting first or top 8 will definitely go down for Briar Chain Katsu. Without Everfest support kind of supplementing that and allowing them to explore newer things. And even as a side note, I think probably the last side note I have, it will be very interesting to see how quickly us as a community can adapt to this new meta, because spoiler season's short and release season's even shorter. We're going to have this product for like a week before ProQuests start kicking off. So, you're gonna be racing to get cards. You're gonna be racing to test. You're gonna be, racing to assemble these decks. Really, especially for like a team. So it'd be very interesting. I think the first couple pro quests we could probably easily expect a lot of reaffirmed picks that people are comfortable with. Maybe they add 1 or 2 new things here and there. I know for me personally, whether I'm playing Magic or any other card game, if I'm testing, I like to try one-ofs. I like to kind of branch out and see, how does this interact with what I already have? Do I want more of it? Do I not want it at all? Does this do something similar? Things like that. We're just not going to have that kind of time. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. I think there'll be a lot of, like, the meta, from what we're kind of gauging right now, I think this information will be valuable to those players, because those first couple pro quests just aren't going to have enough time for people to react and change and evolve. We've seen how long it's taken people to say Viscera is good now, like actually say he's good, not just like, oh, he's kind of tier 2, which is what I've seen a lot of content creators for quite a while say. And I think it'll be interesting how that all pans out.
I think that's the perfect way to end this video. If you guys enjoyed this discussion, if this was valuable to you and your learning and improvement with Flesh and Blood, please drop a like on this video. And if you want more stuff like this, subscribe. We've got discussions. We have tons of gameplay commentary, and not just your typical commentary. We are actually analyzing our games after we play them. We're reflecting on them. We're giving insights into what we're actually thinking versus just describing what the play was. Discussing branching lines of play is super important, especially hearing it from other people so that you can get better at this game. So once again, guys, subscribe to Team Kitchen Fable and expect some more discussions soon. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Yep.